The Jets have requested an interview with Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, as Spags, as you guys have know, has ties in the tri-state area already. He won a Super Bowl with the Giants. So let's get our New York Post sports columnist Mark Cannizzaro on to talk Spags and the laundry list of interviewees. Mark, I feel like everyone's getting a interview for the head coaching job for the Jets outside of me and you. So how you feeling today, man? You ready to talk some Jet football?
I'm doing well. I'm looking at the list of people that the Jets have asked permission for. I wonder if they went out to Times Square and with one of those like banners, the tourist leaders bring out and say, anybody come meet us at the corner of 42nd and 7th and sign the petition.
I was joking that Woody went full Oprah and was like, you get an interview, you get an interview, you get an interview. But, I mean, when we're talking about Spags, man, here's a guy with resume and pedigree. Multiple Super Bowls. I feel like he's going to be a future Hall of Famer coach. When we talk about what he's been able to do as a defensive coordinator, he had time with the St. Louis Rams as the head coach. That didn't work out. But out of all the potential head coaches the Jets have interviewed, or at least waiting to interview, do you think Spags really has a shot to take this job?
Brandon, I hope he has a shot. I've been covering Spags since his days with, his early days of the Giants, and I'm a huge fan of his. I've also covered, postseason runs with the Chiefs and spoken to the players about the way they've done some big pieces on Spags, during Super Bowl runs, about the way they feel about him. He's a guy that draws the players to him. He's not a guy that allows his players to run over him in terms of being too nice. There is a disciplinary element there, but he commands respect, and his record as a DC is, it's out on the paper. You just mentioned resume. That there's the two problems with his resume. If you're looking at it, if you're Woody Johnson, or and his team, or if you're even the Jet fan that maybe isn't enthused about Spags, it's his age, which is 65. Which listen, I don't think 65 is very old, but when you're a team like the Jets that needs an entire infusion of new energy, new culture, you automatically feel like you want a younger guy in there.
Yeah.
And listen, Spags is a young 65. Trust me. I mean, that guy's got serious energy. But the other thing is his record in St. Louis. It was not good. But that was a difficult place to coach. And he had bad teams. That's what happens. When coaches coach teams and have bad records, they have bad teams and no quarterbacks. So the problem is the Jets, I don't actually think are a bad team, but they don't have a quarterback unless they're bringing Aaron back. So I love Spags. I think he's highly intriguing. I hope he's going to get a hard look from Woody and his people. There's a couple of things, checks against him, if you will.
There's one thing I tell people all the time. The Super Bowl year was my rookie year. I was on the practice squad with the Giants, so I used to go up against his defenses pretty much every day. And one thing I loved about him, and I don't necessarily say I don't see it much now in the NFL, but we don't hear about it a lot in the NFL, is how if something was messed up, he would stop the drill, he would stop the period, and make sure guys got it. And the way he did that, guys respected him because of that. And then the problem that they have in the NFL right now, I feel like the younger coaches are trying to be bros too much, and the older coaches are a little bit out of touch. And when you say he's that young 65, he's still relatable, but at the same time, because of his resume and who he is, he also commands that respect as well. But Mark, it's another defensive-minded head coach that they're interviewing. I mean, does the Jets need another defensive guy as their head coach? Defense hasn't really been the problem in recent years.
Yeah, but Brandon, I tell you, I really don't care if a coach is coming from the defensive side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball. I just want him to be a good head coach, a good CEO. That's kind of the buzzword these days. Overlooking the entire operation, and you've got some good perspective, from being part of the squad there when Spags was there, and you kind of referenced it there too. The players respect Spags, and he isn't a guy that people are going to run over. I've done a million of these things, these videos with you, over the last few years, and I'm a huge proponent of Robert Saleh. But Robert Saleh was, I don't want to say he was trying to be a bro coach, but he was too player friendly, in my opinion. He was not I'm not saying the players didn't respect him because I think they did. I think the players really liked playing for him. But sometimes there's a reason they like playing for him, because he's not that hard on them. And I don't think that Robert was hard enough on the players. And I think in his next iteration, if he gets another chance to be a head coach, he'll learn from that. I don't see Spags that way as I mean, listen, when you sit down and chat with Spags, there's not a more awesome guy on the planet, as you know. I mean, this guy is just, you want to. I mean, I've dined with him at, in Super Bowl weeks and things like that, and he just as a guy, bring it in, man. He's just a good guy, but that doesn't mean he's going to be run over, and so what he has to overcome here, when he speaks to Woody and the Jets is. Well, obviously, the first thing you have to do is have a plan. What you're going to bring forward. That's the most important thing. I don't think he needs to sit there for his interview and just and explain why he won 1/3 of his games in St. Louis, 15 years ago or whatever the number was. So, but that is on his resume, right? And so yeah, I hope he gets a good hard look. I think he should get a good hard look. I'm looking at the list of people they have there, and I mean, I'm on record in the Post as saying I just don't think Rex, 2.0 is the right way for the Jets to go. I feel like the circus would be coming back to town, and the last thing Woody needs is a circus, man. You need to kind of like hone this stuff down and, and just get it right. So there's a lot of recycled coaches on that group too. I love Flores, but he needs to, he had some personnel issues with some personality issues with some of his players that have come out. Hopefully, in theory, he learns from that. And I'm a huge Aaron Glenn fan. I've covered his entire career, but Aaron is a first timer. And what I respect most about Aaron is the fact that he came up through the ranks as a low level scout. I mean, I would bump into him in press boxes all over the country. And, he was just anonymously sitting in press boxes watching, doing his scouting reports. So he has worked his way up to the elite spot that he is in right now with Detroit. And, his resume is what Detroit's defense has been doing, with a ravaged, injury-riddled roster. So I just am worried about the first-time head coach, because I'm worried about a guy like that getting swallowed up by the whole Jet malaise because, there's a lot of extracurriculars that take place with the Jets, as you know, and that begins with the owner.
What Aaron Glenn has been able to do with a depleted defense in Detroit is kind of, I'm not trying to compare it, but it's kind of the same of what Spags has been able to do with a cheap defense out with the Chiefs. I mean, you're throwing all that money at the quarterback and Patrick Mahomes. I think there's one highly paid defensive player on that defense, and that's the defensive tackle Chris Jones. So for him to be able to take guys in the third, fourth round, and those guys being Pro Bowl type corners or being able to be staples on that defense and win them games. Patrick Mahomes hasn't won them every single game. That defense has been able to win them games. So I think that's something he has in his favor as well. But is there a name that hasn't really been thrown around in the news that you'd like to see at least interviewed?
Well, I mean, the Matt Campbell, the Iowa State coach, has been kind of floating around out there. I believe he's got an interview set up with the Bears. He's done a really good job there. He's actually coaching Anthony Beck, the former Jets tight end. His son Rocco is their quarterback. I think they finished ranked 19th in the league in the country this year, and they were 11-3, won a bowl game. So he's a guy that's kind of interesting again, but I worry about a college coach or somebody without NFL experience coming in and trying to like completely change the culture of an NFL, not just locker room, but building really. I mean, it's not just a locker room. Like when I was covering the Jets and Bill Parcells came in, he didn't just change the culture inside the locker room, which was a big deal. He did, but he changed it throughout the entire building, and that's a tall task. And that's what the Jets need. They need a CEO leader. Now, I know that Woody experience is important for Woody, but the question is Woody okay with having a first-time head coach and an experienced GM, or vice versa, like one of them being experienced? I'm sure that he's not going to hire two people for those two roles that have not been in those roles before. But the question is, does he want both of them to have experience at those respective roles, or is he okay with just one of them? If that's the case, maybe you kick the tires on Matt Campbell and take a look-see, and then I don't know, the GM situation, they've had a few people in already. You bring a guy in that's already been a general manager in the NFL.
Yeah, I think of that Campbell situation. Jets fans would be highly upset with Woody if he brought him in and it ended up with like Nick Saban with the Miami Dolphins back in
Yeah,
2007.
that was a disaster.
That was a disaster, and that's the last thing any of these Jets fans want is another disaster.
Yeah.
Mark, thanks for hopping on with us today.
Thanks, Brandon. Talk to you soon.